Sup fellow degenerates, it's your boy Rot, or Victor with a K, whichever one you prefer, and welcome back to the channel, though if you're new then hi, hello, howdy-o, nice to have ya. On my last community post, I asked people to give me some ideas for videos. I've been a bit uninspired lately, so I figured turning to my audience for suggestions might help. If you actually still have suggestions, feel free to leave them down in the comments, because I'm always looking for new ideas to get my creative juices flowing. Back to that community post, though, someone suggested that I discuss my experience with autism, and I actually thought that this was a pretty good idea. I have a lot of stories and thoughts related to it, and because I know a large chunk of my audience is also autistic, queer, mentally ill, neurodivergent, disabled, and whatever else, which is very cool, I figure that maybe my stories might resonate with some of you, or be relatable. Maybe you'll understand me better if you're a lot different from me. Or maybe you'll just find me a bit silly and you'll get a laugh out of some of my eccentricities, and that's always fine too. Sometimes a man just has to put on his jester hat. Before I get into all of that, though, I want to take a moment to thank Bonink, Slaughterpup, Asher the Renuki, and Cotton Balls for being members on Ko-Fi. If you're able to and want to support me monetarily, then my Ko-Fi is down in the card link below, wow! As always, it means a lot when people support me, either through Ko-Fi or through commissions or whatever else. You could either make a one-time donation with a value of your choosing, or you could become a member for some extra perks, such as commission discounts, access to my work in progress art, and the benefit of having your name featured in videos, just like I'm doing right now. Wow! Pog. I also just, really love money. And so you should just give some to me for no other particular reason at all. My commissions are still closed at the moment, but they will be open once again on September 1st. So if you're interested in working with me, keep an eye out, girly pops. Alright, so I don't have the most traditional autism realization story out there, or at least I don't think I do. Unlike a lot of kids, I was never told that I was neurodivergent when I was young, and unlike a lot of others, I didn't actually, randomly find out later as an adult after getting an evaluation either. Heck, I didn't even turn to self-diagnosis as a teenager after finding a community of neurodivergent people either. To be honest, I didn't really find an online community of neurodivergent people until I was 16. The villain origin story is actually a secret fourth thing, kind of a combination of all the previous three usual ways that people find out. I do not have a formal autism diagnosis, but I'm not entirely self-diagnosed either. I didn't know that I was neurodivergent as a little kid, and didn't grow up knowing, but I didn't learn much later as an adult either, I learned as a 12-year-old. What actually happened was, well, okay, let me give you all some background. As a really young kid, I had a lot of behavioral and aggression issues. You know how most teenagers have that time in their early teens when their brains are basically on fire and they act erratically, lash out, and are generally pretty insufferable because of the changes that puberty is bringing about? Well, I had a lot of those phases at an even younger age, before puberty, and debatably to a more intense extent. I was terrible, up until, I was 18, deadass. I actually got kicked out of, I think, around 10-ish daycares, preschools, and even a kindergarten because of my behavioral issues as a child. Now, while I won't get into specifics, because this is intended to be a more lighthearted video, I was also going through some home stability issues at the time, as well as recovering from some bad experiences of the icky variety that happened pretty shortly before I started going to school. So it's likely that my past behavioral issues weren't entirely attributable to autism alone, but it was certainly a pretty large contributing factor. After getting kicked out of the kindergarten at age 5, my mom actually decided to pull me out of school for a while and wait to see if I might fare better later. So I started going to school proper at age 6, a year later than most, and therefore graduated high school at almost 19 in 2023. My birthday is June 21st, so it was just a couple weeks after I got my diploma. As a young kid, I never had a diagnosis, and my mom never told me about any developmental or mental issues that I might have had, but even so, I always knew that I was different from most other people. Like most autistic people, I was a super socially awkward kid without many friends. I didn't get along with most other kids, didn't trust most adults, and was neurotic and change resistant. I also have incredibly low empathy, even to this day, and so I felt like an alien a lot because I struggled, and still struggle actually, to relate to or even care about other people. My behavioral issues included a lot of things, like aggression. I was never a bully, I never picked fights or went out of my way to hurt people, but I was an evil little shit if messed with. I was a clawer, a scratcher, a biter, a stomper, and I would beat the living hell out of other kids if they hurt me or fought me first. There was also stuff like me not respecting authority. If a teacher told me to do something and I thought that thing was stupid or illogical, then I wouldn't do it. Like, for real. To get me to do anything, they could never use the because I said so excuse. They'd always be required to logically explain to me why I should do whatever it was that they wanted my cooperation in. I also never really liked or respected most people, especially not my peers. If I didn't like someone, I was always overly blunt and cruel about it. There was this superiority complex I went through where I believed I was smarter and better than everyone else because I did well in school. I was a straight-A student at the time. And so I had trouble relating to people or making friends, and vastly preferred spending times like recess reading or drawing while keeping to myself. Now here's where things get crazy. There was actually a time in my elementary school years, like 4th or 5th grade, that I was convinced that I was antisocial. You know, I thought that I had ASPD, antisocial personality disorder. You see, one of my special interests, even as a really young kid, was true crime, specifically violent crime and the psychology of offenders. Yep, I know that's kind of wild, but Ma let me watch Criminal Minds and Law & Order SVU and true crime documentaries as a child, and I was immediately hooked on those things. Serial killers and violent offenders and, just psychology in general, actually, were all a fascination of mine from a very young age, and so I knew about terms like psychopath and sociopath, and I also knew about the dark triad. While, again, I never actually hurt people for no reason or went out of my way to pick fights, I used to fantasize often about doing violence. Usually in the sort of this person annoys or inconvenienced me type of way where you imagine, like, red shelling someone who cuts you off in traffic, like in Mario Kart, or beating someone up with your mind later after a confrontation with them. Or maybe just repeatedly shanking someone who's talking too loud. Heck, I was even a little bit of a pyromaniac as a child. I would sit in front of lit candles and drop things into them to watch them burn. And once, at 10, I stupidly attempted to light a pile of dead trees on fire next to a forest at a riverside campsite that I stayed at once. I still actually really like fire, and I think that it's neat and cool. So because I was a dumb child, I assumed all of my autistic traits, like my neuroticism, over-obsession and fixation, control issues, social awkwardness and alienation, lack of empathy or understanding of others, sensory issues, and physical and verbal aggression, I just thought all of that stuff meant I was a sociopath, deadass. It's kind of funny in retrospect, because I've probably got a cluster B personality disorder anyways, BPD. But yeah, I'm not antisocial. Shout out though to all my fellow cluster B homies and girly pops. This channel is a non-judgmental, safe space for everyone. Okay, so picture it. There's me, a preteen who believes he's got to be some sort of sociopath, and then 6th grade rolls around. One day my 6th grade math teacher asked me if I was autistic outright. You see, one of my major stims is body rocking. I do it every day, constantly, all the time, in every situation. I do it when I'm working because it helps me focus. I even do it when I'm reading if I'm sitting up. I do it when anxious to calm my nerves. I do it when I'm excited or happy about something, and I'm even doing it right now while I'm typing out this script. I said that when I typed out the script, but I'm even doing it right now while reading it. A lot of people have asked me about it throughout my life since I'm always doing it, and at the time I just say that I don't know why I do this, I just like it. So when my math teacher told me that body rocking was a common stim for autistic people, I remember going home that day and talking to my ma about it, and I was like, hey mom, my teacher thought that I might be autistic because I do that body rock thing, isn't that crazy? You know what they said to me? Ma just went, oh yeah, you are autistic. Huh? Hello? Bro? It turns out that during my youth, when I was getting kicked out of daycares left and right, the staff at the kindergarten suggested that Ma take me to see a child psychologist to get me evaluated for a developmental disorder of some kind. You see, they wanted to put me into the special education system. That was the only way that they would allow me to continue to go to school after what happened when I was kicked out. So, my mom got me evaluated, got 2 doctors' opinions in fact, and they told them that I was a cut-and-dry case of Asperger's syndrome, which is now just classified as autism spectrum disorder, ASD by the way, but was a separate, more specific autism diagnosis at the time. So then they asked my mom if they wanted to get a formal diagnosis, if they wanted to have it on paper and forever in my medical records. And Ma refused. Yep, I never got a formal piece of paper that says I'm autistic. Nope. Now, my mom's reasoning for not wanting to proceed with that was because they knew that the school wanted to put me into special education, which I don't know how special ed is in other places, or even how it is today, like, 2024 type stuff. But at the time, and in my school districts, it really sucked. And again, I later became a straight A student. I was perfectly capable of learning what the other kids were learning, and I didn't need the extra help. I just had some behavioral setbacks. Mom knew this, and so that's why they forewent the diagnosis, pulled me from school, and then sent me a year later than usual after I was ready. And yeah, I did still have some problems here and there when I started finally going to school normally, but overall I did fine and didn't get kicked out again after that. So, I thought that I was insane. Asylum. Okay, I mean, debatably I am, I guess, and I'm fine with that. But it turns out that I'm also autistic, and that my ma didn't want a disability on my medical record that might inhibit me from certain things. And then they just never told me about it until I asked when I was like 12. Wild. A part of me wants to be salty about that, and I am kind of salty that I wasn't told earlier. But ultimately, I'm kind of glad that they never got me a formal diagnosis. It probably would have made my educational life significantly more difficult in many aspects. And there's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental illness and developmental disorders and, you know, in general, just disabilities in the medical and work fields as well. Kinda sucks. So with my villain origin story out of the way though, I just now want to take a moment to talk about some of my personal experiences with autism, some of my traits, and then also talk about what my special interests are. So, to this day, I remain a low empathy autistic person. I tend to be a lot more compassionate and sympathetic nowadays than I was when I was a kid, and I care a lot more about others now than I ever have before, but I still struggle to understand and relate to other people on an emotional or personal level. While I've gotten more sensitive to others over the years, I still tend to make the mistake of being overly blunt, or sometimes I can come off as mean when I'm not actually intending to be that way. I'm also very touch-averse. I don't mind it as much when I'm in control and initiating it myself, but I can't stand it when other people, including close friends and family, touch me without asking first. I also can get overwhelmed pretty quickly from a lot of touch, so I usually just tend to keep to myself in that regard. My sensory issues are usually more on the auditory side of things, like large crowds of people, overlapping voices, and especially people yelling over each other tends to overwhelm me and result in overstim. At my age, I don't usually have meltdowns anymore. I can't even think of the last time I had one, but I do tend to get meaner, snappy, or distressed if I can't leave, like the overwhelming situation in question. I'm also the kind of person whose feelings always show on my face, but I can't read others for shit! I've picked up some social cues over the years, but those are more verbal. Like, I'm pretty good with speech and understanding what the context and subtext and, you know, connotations of things are, but physical things like body language and facial expressions usually don't register or read clearly to me. But I've been told I'm very easy to read, especially when I'm pissed off. Thank God I was wearing a face mask when I used to work customer service a couple years back, because those masks made it hard for rude or loud or creepy customers to tell when I was annoyed or fantasizing about murdering them. Yay! Dog flirting still makes no sense to me. I mean, that's probably because I'm Aries, but I know that my lack of social prowess and my inability to flirt properly is also an autism thing. I'm seriously so embarrassing in that field. Though to be fair, I'm socially awkward and kind of quiet in any social field, so... Now, I know that introversion isn't the case for every single autistic person out there, of course, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that I'm an introvert to the nth degree. I simultaneously desire deep interpersonal connection with others, and I tend to be overly obsessive when I meet new friends. BPD moment. But being friendly and keeping up with friendships and familial relationships even is just an exhausting task for me. I drain my social battery a lot faster than most, and I'm actually scarily good at being isolated and alone for long periods of time without feeling any type of way about it. As long as I have something to do, I can go months without talking to anyone outside of exchanging pleasantries or hanging out and be just fine. I just don't really like people all that much, I guess. But at the same time I do, I have no idea if that makes sense. Touch repulsed and touch starved is me, as it turns out. I still have a bit of a temper, but I no longer have the amount of aggression issues that I used to. I haven't even been in a fight since, I think, 5th grade? I've screamed, yelled, and snapped before more recently, but even that stuff is more rare these days. I'm neurotic about a lot of things, especially organizing and cleaning, and I'm usually a pretty hard worker when I like the work. I'm obsessive, I can really get enraptured by a certain project so much that I forget to get up, eat, or drink while I'm in the tunnel vision, you know, hyper-focus thrall. If you want to get real cringe and specific, my MBTI is INTJ. So yeah, that's kind of like some of the best explanation I can give on both my personality and how my autistic traits manifest and affect different parts of it, I suppose. But what about my special interests? A lot of people have asked me about them. Well, I have many. I think that the most apparent one is art. I love to draw, I've always loved to draw. Drawing is not just my job at this point, but it's also one of my very prized and dear obsessions and hobbies. I similarly enjoy writing. I've actually been writing just as long, actually maybe longer than I've been drawing. I can't decide which one I actually prefer, though I know I tend to feel more accomplished about finishing something when it comes to writing because it's harder and takes longer. Some of my special interests that are a bit less apparent and are things that probably no one else besides friends and family knows about are marine biology. I really like learning about sea creatures and underwater ecosystems and watch documentaries about these things for fun. And true crime, which I mentioned my obsession with earlier. Horror in general has always been a special interest of mine as well, which might not be too surprising considering a lot of my creative works. I tend to like horror stories, both true and fictional, and I enjoy them in both film, audio, and book form. Lately I found that I have an even more specific special interest in extreme horror cinema. I enjoy watching a lot of really extreme narrative films that not a lot of people know about or want to see. I like to check out that sweet, sweet, intolerable, unwatchable garbage, but, you know, only fictional narrative stuff in that regard. Finally, I've also been always obsessed with media analysis and criticism. I like to watch analysis videos and to think critically about all the media, literature, film, television, whatever, you know, that all of it that I consume, good and bad. I'll never know how people can quote-unquote turn their brains off to enjoy something. I'm always here and ready to make mental notes and critiques on it, even if I like it. I just like to think, you know. That sounds super pretentious, I know, but it's true. My media-specific special interests, you know, the ones that I'm pretty sure most people are asking about when they ask what my special interests are, well, those ones tend to fluctuate. It's actually rare that I tend to be fixated on a book or a movie or a show long enough for it to become a special interest, but I've had many in the past. Some include Digimon, the anime, Warrior Cats, FNAF, Undertale, the game, and especially AUs, an animation meme YouTuber's OCs that I won't mention by name, my own OCs, but this is a more rare thing, and Hollow Knight. There are probably more that aren't coming to my head at the moment, but you get the picture. And that's about it with what I had to discuss. I know this video was kind of all over the place, but I hope it was at least fun to listen to, and maybe you got a better understanding of me from it, who knows? If you're also autistic or neurodivergent in general, mentally ill, disabled, queer, whatever, and you want to share some of your experiences, whether they're similar or different than mine, then feel free to leave a comment down below. I think it's always really cool to read other people's stories, and I love the honestly really chill audience I have. And there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you got to the end of this video, rate and subscribe if you feel inclined to do that. Remember that all of my socials and my Ko-Fi are linked in the description if you want to support me. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will now bid you all adieu.